programmed not to understand this, the forbidden code behind Jesus' parables. There is something deeply unsettling hidden within the most well-known words of the Bible, something that, if truly understood, completely dismantles the way you were taught to see God, faith, and even yourself. And the most disturbing part is not that this code is hidden, it's that it has always been in plain sight, yet you were conditioned not to perceive it. What you are about to hear is not a common interpretation. It is a dystopian, raw, and psychologically disorienting reading of what may have been deliberately distorted across centuries. And if you stay until the end, you may never be able to unsee what will be revealed. From an early age, you were taught that Jesus' parables were simple stories, accessible, designed to teach basic moral lessons, a comfortable narrative, almost childlike. But what if that explanation is merely a surface layer, a user-friendly interface designed to conceal something far deeper and potentially dangerous? Because Jesus himself states in multiple moments that he speaks in parables precisely so that many will not understand. This is not symbolic, it is strategic. And when you begin to take that seriously, an unavoidable question emerges. Who is meant to understand, and who is being kept in the dark? The dystopia begins here, because if the words were designed to conceal, then literal interpretation is not just insufficient. It may be a trap, a system of mental containment, a filter that prevents access to what truly matters. And perhaps that is exactly why literalism has been encouraged throughout history, not as a mistake, but as a mechanism of control, because a literal reader does not question, they accept, they repeat, they become predictable, and a predictable system is a controllable system. Now think carefully. What if the parables are codes, not stories, not simple metaphors, but symbolic structures designed to activate a specific type of perception, something that only reveals itself when you abandon the obvious reading and enter a state of active seeking? This would change everything, because then the biblical text stops being a religious book and becomes a device for cognitive transformation, a kind of key, but a key that does not work for everyone. And this is where the tension intensifies, because if only some can access this deeper level, it means there is an invisible division, not between good and evil, but between the awakened and the conditioned, between those who read and those who truly see. And this distinction is not comfortable. It is deeply unsettling, because it suggests that most may be trapped in a superficial layer of reality, while a few cross into something far more profound and disturbing. Now consider one of the most famous phrases, "Do not cast pearls before swine." For centuries, it has been interpreted as moral advice about not wasting valuable things on those who do not appreciate them. But that is only the surface. In a dystopian reading, this phrase becomes a brutal warning. There are truths that should not be revealed to everyone, not because they are beautiful, but because they are dangerous, because they can destabilize the mind of those who are not prepared, or worse, because they can free someone from the system. And if that is true, then we are facing a disturbing paradox. The very message of liberation may have been embedded within a system that prevents that liberation. A code inside a prison, a manual hidden within the mechanism of control itself. This would explain why so many people read the Bible for years and never moved beyond the same mental place. They are reading, but they are not accessing. And here lies the point few are willing to confront. Perhaps the problem is not the text, but the reader, or more precisely, the state of consciousness of the reader. Because if the text was designed to be interpreted on multiple levels, then understanding depends on the ability to perceive beyond the obvious. And that is not taught. On the contrary, in many cases, it is discouraged. Questioning too much is seen as dangerous. Thinking outside traditional interpretation is seen as a threat. And so, the cycle sustains itself. But something begins to break when you recognize this pattern. Because from that moment on, you can no longer read the same way. Every parable becomes suspicious. Every sentence becomes a potential code. And you begin to notice repetitions, patterns, structures that once went unnoticed. It is as if the text begins to respond to your attention, as if layers are being unlocked as your perception expands. And then, an even more disturbing hypothesis emerges. What if Jesus was not only teaching, but selecting? Separating those who could go beyond the surface from those who would remain trapped within it. This completely reshapes the traditional narrative, because it transforms teaching into a filter, a cognitive sieve, a system of spiritual sorting. And this is not comfortable. But perhaps that is exactly why it has been softened over time. Now take this idea to its extreme. If the biblical text contains codes that only some can decipher, and if institutional religion has encouraged superficial readings, then we are dealing with a structure that simultaneously reveals and conceals. A dual system. And that is the perfect definition of a dystopia, a reality in which truth is present, but inaccessible to most. And the most unsettling part is that this does not require external conspiracies. There is no need to imagine secret organizations controlling everything. The system sustains itself, because once superficial interpretation is accepted as sufficient, it perpetuates automatically. Parents teach children. Leaders teach followers. And the cycle continues. Not out of malice, but out of conditioning. But you, at this moment, are no longer in the same position. Because now a seed of doubt has been planted. And that doubt is dangerous. Not in a negative sense, but in a transformative one. Because it breaks passivity. It activates will. And here we return to that philosophical idea. Desire is passive, but will is active. And perhaps that is exactly what the biblical text is trying to provoke in a few. Desire reads the parable and accepts the ready-made explanation. Will reads, questions, deconstructs, reconstructs. Desire seeks comfort, will seeks truth. And these two forces do not coexist easily, because truth, when revealed, is rarely comfortable. It is disruptive, it disorganizes, it forces an internal reorganization. And perhaps that is why most prefer to remain on the surface, not out of incapacity, but out of unconscious choice. Because diving deeper requires confronting things that have been carefully avoided. It requires abandoning certainties. It requires facing the possibility that everything learned may be only an initial layer and not the final destination. Now, if you have made it this far, something has already shifted. Because you are no longer just hearing an explanation. You are participating in a process of reinterpretation, and that alone is already a sign that you have moved out of passive mode. The question now is not whether this is absolute truth, but what you will do with this possibility. Because from this point forward, there are only two paths. The first is to retreat, to return to comfortable interpretation, to close this door and continue as before. The second is to advance, to begin reading differently, to question, to observe patterns, to seek connections, and there is no return from that path. Because once you begin to see, you cannot unsee. And perhaps that is the true essence of the parables, not to teach something directly, but to provoke a state of searching, a productive discomfort, an unrest that forces the individual out of inertia. In that sense, the content of the parable is less important than the effect it produces. It does not deliver answers. It generates questions, and questions are far more dangerous to a system of control than ready-made answers. So the next time you encounter a seemingly simple biblical passage, pause. Do not accept the first interpretation. Ask yourself, what is being hidden here? What is the pattern? What is not being said? Because sometimes the real meaning is not in the words, but in the structure behind them. And if that is true, then the Bible is not just a book. It is a testing ground, a filter, a code, and you have just taken the first step toward decoding it. But be careful. Not everyone wants or is ready to see what lies on the other side.